Morning Year 6, we are reading chapter 31 and 32 of Skysong today. Okay, so from Esca's perspective. The orcas pushed the iceberg on, but when they came to the blue ice tunnel again they left, as soundlessly as they had arrived, and Esca's head filled with images of what she had last seen there. Flint urging her to go on to the last of the groaning splinters, Blue's terrified face as the walrus thrashed closer, the sea swaying red. Fresh tears boomed, and for a moment Esca felt so numb and empty she couldn't move. Then Balapan leant close to her, and she took a deep breath, laid the frost horn by her feet, and paddled back between the remaining icebergs to the open water. The midday sun was dazzling, but through its glare she could just make out the igloo back on the snowy beach. She didn't have a plan yet, but she hadn't heard her voice echo out over the kingdom, so maybe, just maybe, there was still time for an idea to work itself out. But blowing the frost horn from the stars, she wasn't an inventor like Flint. So how was she going to climb up into the sky? A tear trailed down her cheek as she thought of Flint and Blue. And then her heart quickened. Back on the beach, through the haze of sunlight, something was moving. She squinted. Not possible, a voice inside her whispered. But then, please let it be possible. She dug her bow into the water again and again, pushing through the stream of sunlight until she burst through. And there, on the beach, were two people. A little girl dressed in furs playing with a fox pup on the rocks near the end of the bay, and a boy with a mop of tangled brown hair disappearing inside the igloo. They were alive. Somehow Blue and Flint had survived the walrus attack and were waiting for her to return with the frost horn. Esca flung up her arms to get their attention, and out of the corner of her eye she saw something else. A skin boat was rounding the headland into their bay, a tusk guard at its helm, and he was just a few metres from the rocks where Blue was cuddling with Pebble. Esca opened her mouth to shout out, suddenly forgetting her voice had been stolen, and when no sound came she threw up her hands. But Blue was facing the wrong way. She couldn't see Esca or the tusk guard approaching. Mind whirling, Esca seized the frost horn and blew as hard as she could. Nothing happened. Would the horn only sound if blown from the stars? Balapan pecked at her furs. Stay low, the eagle was saying. Stay hidden. Don't do anything that might draw attention. Esca steered behind a solitary iceberg, then she peeked round to scan the beach for Flint. He was inside the igloo still, and the tusk guard silently pulled up his boat and edged over the rocks towards Blue. Esca's body stiffened with fear. She was defenceless, no match for a guard, and his weapons she saw glintering in his boat. She made to move, anything to try and warn Blue, but then she realised that if the guard saw her too, he'd raise the alarm and there could be more tusks further up the coast. They'd take them both, then they'd destroy the frost horn, and there would be no hope of beating the Ice Queen. Esca watched in horror as Pebble launched himself at the tusk guard to try and protect Blue, but he was booted into the snow as the guard clamped a hand over Blue's mouth. Pebble struggled up and ran to the guard again, but the man simply seized the fox pup by the snout and dragged both him and Blue towards his skin boat before binding and gagging them both. The guard began to row back towards the headland, not thinking to check inside the igloo, and though Balapan was pressing all her weight against Esca, trying to hold her back, Esca couldn't just watch as Blue and Pebble were led away. She steered the iceberg into the open and stood up, shouting empty words and waving her hands. Blue's eyes met hers, wide and scared, but the tusk guard was facing the other way, rowing hard along the coast in the direction of the Ice Queen's palace. Confident now that the guard hadn't seen Esca, Balapan soared into the sky after the boat. The eagle shrieked as she approached the headland, and at the sound, Flint rushed out of the igloo. She saw Esca floating towards him and he threw his hands up and cheered. Then he glanced across the beach to where Blue had been playing. He started forward, suddenly realising that his little sister was gone. Then his face paled and he took in the eagle bulleting after the tail of the skin boat gliding around the headland. No, Flint screamed, not Blue, not Pebble. But the tusk guard didn't swing his boat round. He didn't even hear the boy's cry because it was lost in the shrieks of the kaiwalks in the wind. The boat disappeared out of sight and Flint tore across the beach, shouting his sister's name again and again. Esca didn't wait for her iceberg to grind to shore. She leapt into the shallows, then raced over to the snow after her friend. Flint whirled round. Why didn't you warn me? He clambered to the rocks that closed the beach onto the bay and ducked low, peered over the top. Esca grabbed him by the arm and they skidded down into the snow. Then she looked into his eyes and in the silence that followed she willed her friend to understand. Flint gasped. The Ice Queen's stolen your voice. And then he struggled against Esca's hold. We have to go after them. Blue's in danger. Esca tightened her grip. She knew they wouldn't win this way. They had to stay hidden, because blowing the frost horn from the stars was the only way to put an end to the Ice Queen and to rescue Blue. Flint brushed his tears away as he listened to the faraway cry of the eagle, Balapan. She'll bring Blue and Pebble back, won't she? Esker nodded. Flint spoke quietly, his thoughts a tangle of panic and pain. If Balapan fails, Blue will be made a prisoner like Ma. So the Ice Queen won't harm her immediately, not until the midnight sun rises tomorrow. We still have time. The words were spoken as facts, but Flint's voice was wavering. If Balapan returns without Blue, she'll be okay until then with her. Until we go for her, with weapons and a plan, right? He glanced at Esker, then his shoulders slumped. But if the Ice Queen already has your voice, that means you can use it any time. We're too late. Esker looked at her feet. I should go after Blue now, Flint cried, kicking the rocks. What better plan are we going to come up with? Again, Esker held him fast. I never should have let her outside on the beach. Tears sprang into Flint's eyes again, but this time he didn't wipe them away. I should have been guarding her, fighting for her, like Tomkin would have done, not hiding in that igloo inventing. He spat the last word out with disgust, then sat down on the rock, his head in his hands. Esker did nothing for a few minutes. It was hard to work out what to do when there was no words left. Then she sat down too, and although she wasn't sure whether warriors turned inventors really approved of hugs, she hugged Flint anyway. They sat beneath the cliffs, but the eagle didn't return, and after a while Esker noticed the arm of Flint's fur parka was stained with blood. She tugged at it and frowned. Walrus blood, not my only side. I used my ancient knife to kill it after it knocked us off the iceberg. He turned the weapon over in his hand, and Esker noticed the turquoise river gem in the hilt was gone. We would have drowned if I hadn't remembered at the very last moment that stone contained. What that stone contained, he paused. I infused it with a wisp of the south wind, and then I smashed it open and grabbed hold of a loose piece of ice with Blow. The wind blew us safely back to shore. Esker smiled, a smile that was full of pride and respect for her friend. But I'm done with inventing now, Flint muttered. It only ever brings trouble. There was a squeak from the sky, and Balapan glided into the bay and landed. In a tumble of bloodied feathers at her feet, Esker rushed forward and held the bird tight. Her wounds were not serious. Once the eagle preened herself, most of the blood would vanish. There was no sign of Blue or Pebble. Flint hung his head. My little sister, this is all my fault. Esker stood up and strode towards the igloo, because Flint might be done with inventing, but she knew that his ideas were the only thing powerful enough to take her to the stars. It won't work. I was mad to think it would. He clambered back up to the rocks and scored the coast for his sister, but she was long gone. We should be going after Blue. Esker carried on walking, with Balapan flying alongside her, and the long white tusk raised in her hand. It shone like a sliver of moonlight. It was impossible not to feel its magic, and at the sight of it, Flint gasped. You found the legendary Frosthorn? He hurried after Esker. But just because you have it doesn't mean my invention will work, you know. It's useless. Esker ignored him and broke into a run. Then Flint was running too, back towards the igloo. Esker disappeared inside, her heart thumping at what Flint might have made, but what she saw was not what she was expecting. Arrows fletched with snow goose feathers to replace the quiverful she'd lost in the walrus attack. Esker tried to smile. She was grateful, of course, but how were these arrows going to take her and Flint to the stars? I was just using the leftover snow goose feathers to make you some more arrows. Flint looked at his feet. The invention is behind the igloo. It's too big to fit inside. Esker hurried outside where Balapan was waiting for her, and there, tucked behind the snow house, looking more glorious than she could ever have imagined, was Flint's latest invention. A vehicle carved entirely out of driftwood. It balanced on 3 wheels, 1 on the front and 2 behind, and in the hollow scoop of the body there was 2 seats and a small lever in the front. But most splendid of all were the wings mounted on the wooden rods above the vehicle. Giant white wings made from hundreds of snow goose feathers Flint had gathered in the lost chambers. Esker blinked. How could Flint have done all this since the walrus attack this morning? As if he could sense her thoughts, Flint said, I worked through the night to get it done. Esker's baffled heart shone because she had a friend who, like Balapan, would never let her down. And as she looked into Flint's marvellous creation, she felt a stream of memories flood back of someone whose loyalty and love blazed just as brightly as this, her pa, Wolftooth, a large man with blue eyes and a gentle face, carrying her on his shoulders when she was very little, wrapping her in a duck throw before a campfire, lifting her across the river's fastest currents. Esker let the memories eddy her away, then Flint reached into his pocket and drew out a handful of little green gems. Solidified glowworm light, he said quickly, bottled at midnight during our stay at the Lost Chambers. Jay helped me when you and Blue were sleeping. Should shine bright when the night closes in. He glanced at the engine, a wooden cylinder stopped by a stone. Contains the loudest wolf growl ever heard in Deep Roots, and a bolt of lightning from a bottle we used at the Grey Man yesterday. But even so, there's no guarantee it'll help us get to the stars. Esker spun round and hugged Flint tighter than ever, and Balapan ruffled her wings in delight. Flint blushed. I call it woodbird, but I don't know if it'll fly. Esker grinned. Flint had lost his sister and his beloved fox pup. She had lost her voice, but here lay a way to reach the stars. Chapter 32, The Ice Queen. The Ice Queen blinked 2 frosted crystal eyelashes at the statue in front of her. The glass was completely black now, and whirling inside the neck, behind the key Slither held in place, was a shimmering gold liquid. Esker's voice. Remove the key, the Queen purred. Slither took it out, and the Ice Queen unscrewed the orb from her staff and slipped it beneath the throat of the statue, forcing the gold liquid to seep into it. Then, when the last of the gold had dripped into the orb, the Ice Queen waved her hand over it, and the black eyes closed around Esker's voice. Placing the orb in the pocket of her gown, the Queen turned towards Slither. Tonight, I shall play my organ one last time. I shall swallow the remaining voices in my choir, of course, but when that is done, I shall feed on Esker's voice, before using it to call the outlawed children into my command and tear down the sky gods. She smiled. Then, with immortality achieved, and the kingdom in the skies under my control, I will destroy the fur and the feather tribes, and our rule will begin in earnest. There was a shuffle of feet. Then a Tuskar appeared in the hallway of the turret. She shoved a small girl dressed in fox furs forward. In her hands she held a whimpering fox pup. The Ice Queen towered above Blue. A fur child, she hissed. Already the tribes are surrendering themselves. Found her out by the groaning splinters, the guard muttered. The Ice Queen stalked in a circle around Blue. Who are you? Blue sobbed into Pebble's fur. I scared. Want brother? The Ice Queen looked disgusted. Pathetic. She glanced at the guard. Feed her to the wolverines. She has no place in my kingdom. The Tusk Guard grabbed the scruff of Blue's neck, and her sobs grew louder. One brother, Flint, and Esker, I scared. The Ice Queen flinched at Esker's name, and supposing Flint to be the boy who had helped Esker escape from Winterfang, she motioned for the guard to stay where he was. She was silent for a few moments, then she slid her pale face in front of Blue's. Perhaps I won't throw you to the wolverines just yet, she whispered. Perhaps I will keep you as bait. She raked her sharp nail down Blue's cheek. I want you to be the first thing Esker and that wretched boy see when I call the tribes in. The sight of your snivelling face will show them who has won. The Ice Queen smiled. You will never survive in my Erkenwald, but tonight you will play your part. Chapter 33. It's a nice short one, so we will read another one. Faster, Flint cried. We need more speed to get this thing off the ground. Gripping the side of the woodbird tighter, Esker dug her heels into the snow and ran on. The vehicle careered forward, bumping over pebbles and juddering across patches of ice, and Flint swallowed as he glimpsed at the rocks at the far side of the bay, looming through the darkness. They needed to be airborne in the next few seconds. He pumped his legs harder, and Balapan yapped from above. Then just meters before they smashed into the rocks, he yelled, "Now!" Esker leapt into the vehicle, back seat, while Flint jumped into the front, and then Flint snatched the lever before him and the woodbird was yanked upwards, the wheels grazing the rocks below, hardly daring to breathe. Flint hugged the lever to him, the engine spluttered and clanked, and for a second the woodbird seemed to hang in the air. Then there was a deep rumble from the back of the vehicle. Yes, Flint breathed. Come on, come on! The wolf growl grew louder and louder, and the spluttering stopped. Hold on to your stomach, Flint cried, and woodbird soared into the sky, leaving the rocks and the bay far behind. Wide-eyed, Flint clutched the lever. Behind him, Esker sat open-mouthed with the frost horn across her lap. They were racing through the night, side by side with the golden eagle, as the bolt of lightning inside the engine propelled them closer and closer to the stars. The glow-warm light flickered from the wheels, and the snow goose feathers spread out in a white arc above them. They were flying. His invention had actually worked, and the speed and the height and the wonder of it all made Flint's face glow. Esker reached forward and shook Flint's shoulders. He glanced around, remembering how he'd envied Balapan before the groaning splinters. Wings, he cried above the engine noise, make all the difference. And they laughed then, despite everything, because they were climbing through the sky and the icebergs were like drops of milk on a silver-black ocean below. Flint glanced inland, and the peaks of the Nevercliffs and the miles of frozen tundra around them. The night was clear, save for a few stray wisps of cloud, but woodbirds burst through those in a second, on and on towards the flickering stars. Balapan soared beside them, a rippling silhouette, and when Flint dipped his head at her, she shrieked with delight. The sky was her playground, and those she loved had found a way into it. Home to the eagles and the sky gods, Flint whispered to himself. Now this is surely the biggest detour yet. He gazed at the crescent moon in the distance, the last one before the midnight sun took over the next day. and moved the lever to the right so that Woodbird veered inland, towards Winterfang, Blue and Pebble. The driftlands below were empty and dark. No light shone from the tusk igloos, no shadows moved between them. The Tush tribe have gone, Flint cried. Esker shifted behind him. It seemed she knew as well as he did that they wouldn't be gone for good. They would be waiting somewhere for both of them. And as they rose higher and higher into the sky, and eventually the Ice Queen's palace came into view, Flint and Esker saw the dark shapes of an army massed at the foot of the bridge. The tusks had been called to Winterfang. The Ice Queen was readying for a fight. Flint's fingers tightened around the lever, and Woodbird climbed through the night, up towards the stars. She lost track of time completely. But he knew they had arrived because of the silence, a quietness that could only exist in a far place removed from people. Here the stars were no longer small lights above them. They were a sea of dazzling diamonds shimmering every which way, and Esker looked. The sky gods, Flint breathed, were floating amongst the gods. And he turned off Woodbird's engine so that they could glide in silence between the sparkling lights, and Flint twisted round in his seat. Now, Esker, blow the frost horn before the Ice Queen uses your voice. Then, when the sky god stops singing its tune, with the power of the gods on our side, we might be in with a chance of saving our kingdom. Esker held the narwhal tusk to her lips doubtfully. You can do it, Flint whispered. I believe in you, just like you believed in me with the Woodbird. Esker threw a worried look at Balapan, and Flint could tell that her courage was waning. Think of where we started all this, he said. You trapped in a music box, and me thinking tribes were fixed things, and letting others it was dangerous. He glanced across at the stars. Well, look at us now, Esker. Look at where we've come. We've silenced the tribe. You've commanded the animals. It's time to shake the skies. And those, Flint realised, were the words Esker needed. She pressed the frost horn to her mouth, breathed in, and great heaving breath that seemed to start right down in her toes, and she blew. The sound was quiet at first, and Flint wondered how on earth such a small sound could make a difference. Then the sound grew, louder and louder, until it filled the sky around them, wobbling the moon, and just as Whitefur had said it would, shaking the stars. It was a strong, clear note, and low like an owl's hoot. Then it rose slowly to become a rippling melody, which made Flint think of the very first droplets of magic falling on Urkemold and bringing it to life. The melody became fuller and bolder, as if it was rising with its strength of the mountains and the ancient forests. Then the tune turned again and changed again, softer once more, but filled with such longing and heart that Flint felt that if hope was a song, it would sound just like this. Flint listened on. He had heard trees crash down in deep roots. He had heard the battle cries of warriors and the mighty roar of grizzly bears, but those songs were nothing compared to this. The Skysong was the call of Esker's tribe, built of wild, unexpected things, bears, eagles, giants, inventors, little lost girls and the sky gods themselves, and it was the fiercest sound of them all. Flint looked at Esker then. Eventually her breath ran out and the sound of the horn died away. She raised a hand to her throat, and Flint hoped that everything inside of them that the Skysong had brought her voice back, but when Esker opened her mouth to speak, nothing came out. Woodbird floated on through the night beside Balapan. The sky gods, Flint whispered. They must have heard the song. Maybe they'll come to our aid. And at that moment, after almost a year without even the faintest flicker of the northern lights, the sky filled with colour. Green spirals rippled through the night, bulging and swelling, before fading away to let ribbons of lilac swirls through. Red arcs curved above them, then beams of blue flooded down. Flint and Esker smiled, and Balapan rolled and somersaulted in joy. The sky gods are dancing again, Flint whispered. They're acknowledging that you are the rightful owner of the Skysong. Maybe that means... The flights dimmed suddenly. Out of nowhere, the Ice Queen's anthem crawled into the night. And then, without warning, Woodbird fell from the sky, down through the glitter of stars, down through the night, as if the sky gods themselves had spat the children out of the secret world. Flint screamed. Esker flung her arms around his waist, and Balapan plummeted with them, her wings tucked in tight. Eyes streaming, Flint grappled for the lever and switched the engine back on. They were going too fast to heave the Woodbird up now, but he could still steer. He could land this if he needed to. He gathered the vehicle back into control, then he and Esker gasped. Winterfang was directly below them, a sprawl of ice towers and domes. Flint winced. He could hear the Ice Queen's anthem more clearly now, a dim drone compared to the blast of the frost horn. But it was there all the same, and it filled him with terror, because any moment now the Ice Queen would sing with Esker's voice. Flint swerved to miss the ice towers, circled around the front of the palace, but the rumble of the Woodbird's engine was enough to rouse those in the fortress. The anthem cut to silence. There was a dreadful hush. Then Flint's heart lurched as he looked down. Standing in an ice arch in front of the hall he'd trespassed in only 2 weeks before was the Ice Queen, a wolverine on one side, and on the other his little sister, clutching Pebble. "See," the Ice Queen screeched, winding a hand around Blue's neck. "I have everything that I want. I get everything I want in the end. Everyone will bow down to me." She drew the black orb out from her gown and caressed it. "The northern lights you saw just moments ago were the sky gods recognising my claim on Eska's voice." Flint shook his head in disbelief. Eska had stirred the sky gods with the frost horn. She had journeyed to the groaning splinters and then into the stars, not the Ice Queen. And yet, as Flint looked at the Queen now, and the men, the women, the children from the Tusk Guards cheering before the palace, he wondered whether he and Eska had, in fact, been too late. Had the power of the Skysong belonged to the Ice Queen from the moment Eska's voice had vanished? "My brother!" Blue cried from the arch. "My brother!" Flint could barely see through the rage and the pain that was unfolding below. He and Eska weren't enough. He realised that now, not in the face of the Ice Queen and a Tusk tribe baying for their lives. He circled helplessly above the jeering army. Then Balapan cried out before them, and Eska stood up, red hair streaming in the wind. She raised the frost horn to her lips again and blew. The sound was different from before. Instead of the Skysong, there came a summoning blast, full of spirit and fight. And at the sound, Balapan's circles widened and the eagle sent out her call into the wild. The Ice Queen threw back her head and laughed. Her army did the same, but out of the corner of her eye, Flint could see other things happening. Children dressed in wolf furs and feathered shoulder plates, marching along the cliff tops towards the palace, their arms torn against their bows. "The Feather Tribe," Flint gasped, veering Woodbird towards them. They came at your call, Eska." Eska blinked. Jay and his tribe had kept their promise. The Tusk tribe shifted and one or two reached for their spears, but the Ice Queen only cackled. "And here comes the Feather Tribe at last," she called, "sensing the power I now hold with Eska's voice. They have surrendered just hours before the midnight sun rises." Flint frowned. Had the Ice Queen drawn Jay's tribe here? Had they come to surrender rather than fight? Then he noticed the Urkin bears flanking the children on either side, and the direction of the tribe's arrows were pointing straight at the Ice Queen's heart. He breathed again. This was not a tribe coming to surrender. The Flint saw something else. Hurtling across the snow from the south came dozens of sleds, pulled by huskies. Flint blinked once, twice, then a third time. The Fur Tribe, his tribe, had come, despite detours and inventions, despite everything. Eska pointed to the stone giants charging forward in the midst of the Fur Tribe, and Flint's jaw dropped. "The Grey Man," Flint whispered. "When he left us, he said he had someone he wanted to talk to. He must have gone to Deep Roots to summon the Fur Tribe while he was on his way to the Groaning Splinters. But there was another person Flint was even gladder to see, and it took in the warrior boy steering the front sled, leading his tribe on towards the palace. His heart burst with pride. "Tomkin," he roared. The Ice Queen shot Woodbird and its passengers a furious look, because she realised now who the tribes had come for, and that, although she held Eska's voice inside the orb, it was not hers for the keeping quite yet. "I will tear you down, Eska," the Ice Queen screamed, "and your pathetic little friend up there with you. I own your voice now." The Fur Tribe drew closer, and Tomkin leapt off the sledge and shouted up to the arch where the Ice Queen stood. "Oi!" he yelled. "That's my brother, and no one talks to him like that." Flint's heart soared as Tomkin's words, and then he steered the Woodbird between the ice towers, down towards the bridge where it was flat enough to land. Flint turned to Eska. "You own the Ice Song, Eska, and here is your tribe." He pointed at the outlawed children, the giant and the Urkin bears below. "Everyone here has come because of you." And at his words, Jay's army released their arrows, a flurry of wood and feathers into the middle of the Tusk tribe. That's the end of chapter 33. How emotional. I feel myself getting a bit, reading it. So, we're in the middle of war, okay? So hopefully tomorrow's chapters, we can read those and we can find out what happens and whether they're able to save everybody and whether they'll survive. So I hope you've enjoyed those 3 chapters. There's some very exciting chapters there. So make sure you like our videos and keep using our channel. Does everyone want to say bye? Bye. And we'll see you all soon.